The creation of a HERS index score for real estate transactions means that in the future, no, I shouldn't say it that way. Right now, many locations, that index score is mandatory when you sell a home. And what is an index score? An index score is like a golf score. If you get a score on a home of 100, that means the home basically meets code for that jurisdiction. If you get a score of 0 for a home, that means it's technically a zero energy home, that the home really requires no energy in essence. What normally happens is that there's a solar system or wind system that provides enough energy at that building site so that when the home does use energy at night, it produces enough energy during the day or on windy days to offset what it uses, so that technically it doesn't really use energy, but the reality is it's an ebb and flow situation. But you can get a home that actually has a negative score. You can build a building that produces more energy than it requires. Now, if that is economically justifiable, that's another story, but it is possible. So, if you want to sell homes in certain areas, and this may in all probability become a reality for every home sold in the United States, whether they're new or existing in the not too distant future, most likely whatever we see in terms of cap and trade or the future energy legislation is going to require that every home sold has a HERS index score attached to it. It'll just be another item that happens when you fill out the paperwork to buy or sell a home. So this is going to be a big deal in the not too distant future. Real estate transactions will have this component, and most of the multi-list services across the United States already have provisions for listing the HERS rated score on a home, and mostly the energy and green features as well. I do know that the Heartland Multi-List in the Kansas City area has provisions for listing the energy and green features of a building. And verification of code compliance. A HERS rater can go in and rate a home and provide a score that shows that the home does meet code, because if you recall, I said a home with a score of 100 technically meets code for that jurisdiction. There's a number of different energy codes across the country, so you have to know as an energy rater what energy code you're working with, and you can use the software to verify that that building does in fact meet that code for that jurisdiction. So it is a helpful tool, and many locales are now looking at using energy raters to go out and do ratings on buildings to verify code compliance, because typically their code inspectors didn't look at energy code as much as they did fire and safety and structural and other code issues, and they weren't too closely monitoring the energy code component. So, but that's becoming a bigger and bigger deal, and so that's something that a HERS rater can do, is provide that index score for that very reason. Now let's delve into some details about energy efficient and energy improvement mortgages. Energy efficient mortgages are used to finance energy efficient new or existing homes. In other words, buildings that don't really need much in the way of improvement before they're sold. So it's typically a lower interest loan. It might have a bigger debt to income stretch ratio so that more people can qualify for the loan. And there's other incentives that are involved typically in an energy efficient mortgage to incent people to buy energy efficient new or existing homes. But the vehicle we really see taking off across the United States is the energy improvement mortgage. This can be used to finance energy upgrades to existing homes. So if you're, or it can even work with new homes. So you're looking at buying a new home, let's say. Let's do a scenario. I'm going to start by talking about energy efficient and energy improvement mortgages, specifically the energy improvement mortgage, in kind of a broad brushstroke manner, using very straightforward numbers so that I can give you an idea of how these mortgages work. And then I will bring up in a different format the paperwork that's involved in the energy efficient and energy improvement mortgages. But bear with me as I go through an example scenario of how a person might use an energy improvement mortgage. Let's say a buyer is very interested in buying a home, so he goes to his local lender and he says, gee, I'd like to buy a home. How much do I qualify to, how much could I be pre-qualified to buy? And so the banker says, oh, it looks like you are able to buy a $100,000 home based on your credit score and your income. So the buyer takes that pre-qualified information with him and he starts to look around and he sees some homes he likes, and so he finally narrows it down to one home that he thinks is really great, and he goes in there and says, "What are you selling your home for?" And the seller says, "I'm selling this house for $100,000. And the buyer says, "Well, that's great, because I happen to have a pre-qualified note here that says I can buy a $100,000 home." And the seller says, "Well, it looks like we got a deal." And the buyer says, "Well, I would like to bring in a certified home energy rater to look at this property to make sure it meets code." Now, in most cases, the seller will look at the buyer and say, "Well, I'm not really sure what you're saying, but as long as you'll pay for the rater, or as long as there's a program out there that'll pay for this rating, then I am not opposed to it, as long as I don't have to pay for it." So the buyer says, "Sure, I'll pay for the rater, or I have a mechanism in place that will pay for the rater, so let me get a rater to come over here and look at this property." So along comes a certified home energy rater, and he or she does an evaluation of this home, and they do the blower door test, and they check everything out, and they look at the efficiency and the age and condition of the heating cooling equipment and the water heating equipment, and the windows and the doors, and basically the entire structure, and they put all that information into a program such as REMrate software, which is a rating software program, and they run it through the calculations, and they find out that this home doesn't quite meet code. Now, if you recall, I said a score of 100 is a home that meets code, and a score of 0 is a zero energy home. So if you happen to have a home that's above 100, it means it doesn't quite meet code. So let's say the lender tells the buyer, "Gee, this looks like a very nice house, but energy efficiency wise it gets a score of 110. So basically it's 10% worse than code, and really, I'd recommend that you get some things done to bring it up to code." And the buyer says, "Well, what are we talking about?" And so the rater says, "Well, I've done some number crunching and I've done some improvement analysis, and in your case, if we put in since the furnace and air conditioner is quite old, and since you've got some bad windows, I would recommend that we replace the furnace and air conditioner, and we fix a few windows, and we do an air sealing package, and I think we can do all this for $5,000. And so the buyer says, "This sounds like great information. Let's go back and meet with the seller. I'll take that paperwork with me." And so the buyer and the seller sit down again, and the buyer says, "I'd love to buy your house. In fact, I intend to, but the rater says it needs a little bit of work to have it meet code," at which point the seller says, "I don't want to put any more money into this home. I just want to sell it." The buyer says, "No problem. Let's go see if we can find a lender to do an energy improvement mortgage." So they go to their local lender and sit down with the loan officer and say, the buyer says, "I'd like to buy this property. I've had an appraiser come out and appraise the property, and it does appraise for $100,000. And the seller wants $100,000, and I, as the buyer, you've already pre-approved me for the $100,000, so we know all that's good. But I've had an energy rating done on this building, and it shows that the home is 10% over code, and I would like to go ahead and do an energy improvement mortgage so that I know the home meets code." And the banker says, "Boy, we just happened to do those. We're in luck." So now this is where I want you to start paying attention to where I'm going to say these next things so that you don't get lost. At this point, the banker then says, "Why don't we go ahead and close this loan as a pre-closing? I'll sell the house. I'll do the paperwork, so the seller will sell the house to you, the buyer. The seller will sign the paperwork, and now the seller's done. He can walk away. And the appraisal that he gave us for the home shows that the home is in fact worth $100,000. So we'll file that appraisal away as well. So we're done with the appraisal, and we're done with the seller. Now, hey, Mr. Buyer, you and I now have an arrangement where if you want to buy this house under the energy improvement mortgage and you want it to meet code, we're willing to give you the extra $5,000 under this energy improvement mortgage, and we'll escrow that money so that these improvements can be done, so that when you move it to the home, it does meet code. So we'll stick $5,000 into an escrow account. Go ahead and contact your energy rater and tell them that we're going to do this energy improvement mortgage. And then I know you've already got bids from contractors for the furnace replacement, for the new windows, and for the air sealing package. So tell them to go ahead and proceed on these and get them done right away.